Just touching on the holistic approach and the life journey that we've been talking about, which very much fits what you're saying. There's another aspect that I'd like to hear a bit more about, and that is the Insuring Women's Futures initiative that you are founder of. So, what's this all about? How did it come into being?
Well, that's actually, I suppose, is a case in point, really, because one of the things I realise is rather wonderful about the CII is that we obviously have a royal charter, and uh, I mean, in essence, a charter is just a sort of an old-fashioned mechanism for creating incorporation. But a royal charter, you hold a royal charter in the interests of society, not in the interests of the sector, or in fact, not in the interests of your members either. So a professional body, although you join as a member, it's a society of members for the benefit of the public, not a membership organisation for the benefit of the members in a true mutual sort of sense. Um, and obviously what the charter says, the big umbrella is, secure and justify the confidence of the public, because obviously with something like insurance, trust is everything really. But in the objects then of the charter, it sort of tasks us as a body to ensure, I suppose, two things, or to look at, to always consider two things. If you look out into society, are there groups of people that for either exclusion or actually more importantly, probably lack of relevance, are they somehow being left out of the amazing protection and help that our products and services can actually bring to people's lives? And we, in order to do that, what we do is do research essentially, and we sort of bumped into the gender agenda, if you like, in the sense that a number of us were just discussing areas where there did seem to be a lack of engagement with insurance and financial services more widely, and we were just sharing experiences, and we started going, oh, because lots of us had similar experiences that our mothers or our grandmothers or our aunts or our sisters or whatever seemed to be getting themselves into these positions where, they were, severely financially sort of stressed in some way. And it was like, because I'd not really thought there would be, a sort of a big difference between men and women. I mean, nobody's that good with money, but I was just thinking, I didn't realize there was such a so I asked Sandy, because this conversation was happening just as I was transiting into the CII, and I said, if we wanted to do some research on this, is this the sort of thing that the CII does? And he said, well, absolutely, because that's one of the things the charter sort of tasks us with doing. So I was very, very lucky that a group of people agreed to do this on a completely pro bono basis. So we, as the CII, provided the financial backing, if you like, and the secretariat. But there were five of us originally that kind of got together and said, let's look into this. And I was very lucky that Jane Portas, who was moving at the time from KPMG to PwC, and is a very experienced. She's a scientist by background, but she's also done a lot of investigative and research work over the years. So she, if you like, she knew how to do this, properly. What we did was plan to look at we called it Insuring Women's Futures because that's where we started from. But in the end, what we ended up doing was looking at the differences between men and women. So it's not about judgment or saying this is right or that's wrong. It's a comparative. And we essentially plotted the life journey and said, what are the differences between a woman's life and a man's life? And then what are the risks that a woman would face in her life? And what are the differences between those risks between men and women? And then what's the financial impact of that? So in a funny way, Jane's brilliance in this was to apply what you might call a risk assessment to people's lives. And she came up with something, it's like a framework, a risk assessment framework, and it ended up identifying 12 what we call perils and pitfalls, and they plot along a woman's life, but they compare the data for men and women. And then the brilliant thing at the end of it was that what you realize is you can then see how the other 10 lead to the last two. So first of all, the first 10 lead to what we call the pensions deficit, the women's pension deficit. And then, of course, the last one is what we call the longevity trap, because on the whole, women do still live longer than men, and they often live in worse health than men, and they therefore need care themselves at the end of their lives, having been carers to everybody else all the way through their life. And yet, if you look at the financial position that the average woman is in at that time when she needs the money, she's in a significantly worse position on average than a man. And that just doesn't add up. And if you look at it just purely from a societal perspective, half the population are women. So by definition, if women lack resilience, everybody lacks resilience. And more importantly, by 2050, it's estimated that a third of the population will be over retirement age. So the financial position retired people are in is very important by then. And there's likely to be 1 million more women than men in that group. So if women are in a financially less resilient position, that impacts everybody. I suppose the killer stat for me was that, this is average, and this includes all pension ability, but the average woman's pension pot, not the pension itself, but the pension pot at the end, when she would really need it, is only a fifth of that of the average man. And this is average, it's not the worst case situation. So it is very, and the other one is that, the lifetime earnings of a woman on average is only 64% that of a man. So there's a significant difference in financial resilience of between men and women. Now, the beauty of this framework, because what we then said was, okay, so the first research was the perils and pitfalls, if you like. Great. So what do we do about it? That's when we came up with the life journey and the moments that matter. So what we then identified was what we call 6 moments that matter. And they could occur at different times in different people's lives, depending on their circumstances. They're linked to the life circumstance, but they are points where an intervention would make a difference. And they can be twofold, really. They can be things you don't know, that if you then make a decision without knowing those things can actually make a really big difference, or things that you do know, but you don't understand the implications of them. And so the 6 moments that matter are kind of designed to sort of say, right, if you're entering into the workforce, what are the things that you need to know? What are the things you should be thinking about? If you're entering into a relationship, what are the things you need to know, and what are the things you should be thinking about? So it's that approach. And we sort of joked and said, it's sort of 6 moments that will change the world, really.
Can you point us in a direction of where people listening can access some of this information?
Yeah, so we have a microsite which is just Insuring Women's Futures, and then you can, if you want to make a difference individually, so you want to actually yourself learn about this stuff and then go and communicate to other people, you can become an IWF ambassador in your own right. So you can sign up on the site. It's really easy. And that means you get a newsletter, and we keep you informed. And all the stuff that's on the site is public information. So you can download it, you can use it on screen. There's some video there, there's Vimeos, there's all the research reports are on there in a very nice form, nicely designed form. And in particular, we turned just the research then into a market task force with a manifesto to actually make things happen. So we're now past the research phase, if you like. The task force came out with quite a lot of recommendations, and we're actually now in train to say, right, how do we take those recommendations and actually turn them into reality? And in fact, we had a policy roundtable just last week, week before last, and that's with ABR. That's with the trade bodies, government bodies, the regulator, and the third sector, as to how do we take these recommendations and then land them with the people who've actually got the convening power to make a difference. So that's what we're doing at the moment. But if I could just give you an example, I mean, one of the biggest things about this is awareness raising. And at the end of last year, we had our manifesto launch along with all the recommendations. But we did alongside it, we did what we called we did an event called Talk to 10,000, and the idea was for each of the ambassadors just to talk to 10 other people about this. Of course, women, great, but it didn't have to be women, it could be anybody. And in the end, so we were a bit nervous, about whether all 1,000 would do it. So would we get to our 10,000? Of course, the press were quite interested in this. And in the end, we did, it was 1.6 million. So I know in social media land, that's, it could have been 1 billion, I know, but 1.6 million people got, talked with each other and to other people about things that they may or may not have had any knowledge of before. And we had an awful lot of feedback from, women in particular, but actually quite a lot of men saying, gosh, I had no idea that these things were so, that they have such a build-up effect. And, a lot of people quite angry about the fact they didn't know, these things earlier in their life, and that their life had been impacted by not knowing these things. So, there's enormous amount of stuff to work with there. But the beauty of the framework is it can apply, we could equally switch it round and call it Insuring Men's Futures or Insuring Everyone's Future, because it's just a framework for looking at the risks in life and then working out what the best interventions are to make a difference. You can do it, you can do it on other, any other intersection as well, because I mean, BAME is an obvious one as well, because anything that affects the average, the likelihood is that any other intersection is actually going to be probably impacted even more than the norm, if you like. So disability or any of these other things. But the Insuring Futures framework is designed to give you a framework to work with to then actually get to some conclusions to actually make some things happen.
That's absolutely incredible. I'll make sure I put the link to this, to the initiative in the show notes to this podcast. So anybody listening, please do go and check it out and sign up. I think it's turning everything on its head, giving it a tangible financial implication rather than an emotive issue. It's incredible.
Well, that's why I was so privileged to work with a group of really rigorous people at the beginning, because I mean I'm from, as I say, I'm from a commercial background. I'm not from a policy or a sort of academic or a consulting background, but the one thing that all of those guys do is they go to the facts first, whereas quite a lot of entrepreneurship is about feel or about, I mean, I'm not being disrespectful. I know there's a lot of research goes into business as well, but academic research is a bit different. And there is an awful lot of information out there. I mean, we deliberately only used independent data. So ONS, most of it's there within the ONS statistics, but what happens is nobody does the analysis on a gender basis or on a BAME basis or on a, that most people feel that the average is good enough. And sometimes it is, but if you want to be more rigorous, you've actually got to, you've got to look underneath at what the stark realities of the underlying data look at. And of course, once you start to look, you then see how different things are, which, if you think about life, is completely logical, isn't it? I mean, people with less opportunity in life, this is why social mobility is so important, because, by definition, people who are in a poorer environment generally are poorer in all ways, you know, not just that they start off with less money, but that impacts all sorts of other things along the way. And so if you don't think about those things, you don't create pathways for people to actually progress, you know, progress from where they are to somewhere better. And that's why this idea that you have to look at everything on an average basis is can be very misleading.
The idea of looking at this from a cumulative effect is very, very powerful.
Why something like this is so important, just to give you a tangible example. So, as you know, the government have brought together the sort of public advice bodies that were sort of out there, and they've created something called the Money and Pension Service. And the Money and Pension Service is statutorily created now, and it has funding from the government, and it is there now to try to help the UK population have a much more comfortable and knowledgeable relationship with money, and particularly with long-term savings. Interestingly, there was not going to be a gender lens on that until we were able to show that if you just kept taking measures on an average basis and did not get to grips with the fact that women are very much less engaged with what and how and what their options are, and that the financial services sector has not given enough thought to engaging with women as opposed to men. We could potentially come out with lots of campaigns or activities or whatever that are supposed to bring the level of the public, up, and yet all it would do is bring one element of the public up, which is a good thing, but that's not kind of what it's really there to do. It's supposed to bring everybody's level of ability up.